They thought she was weak. They thought she was an easy target. But what they didn't know? She had a silent guardian by her side who had spent years taking down criminals like them. And when they made their move, they instantly regretted it. Mrs. Eleanor Williams was 72 years old, living a quiet life in her small town. She spent her days gardening, baking, and walking her dog, a large, intimidating German shepherd named Titan. To most people, Titan was just a regular pet. But what no one knew, Titan was no ordinary dog. He was a retired police K-9, trained to take down the most dangerous criminals. One night, as Eleanor walked home from the store, she found herself surrounded by 3 men. They thought she was helpless. They thought they could take what they wanted. They thought wrong. It wasn't the safest area, but she had never been the type to live in fear. At 72 years old, she still carried herself with quiet dignity, her posture straight, her eyes sharp. She had lived through enough hardships to know when to be cautious and when to stand her ground. Her only true companion was Titan, a large German shepherd who never left her side. To most, he was just an aging dog, a gentle giant who accompanied his owner on her daily walks. But what people didn't know, what no one bothered to ask, was that Titan was no ordinary pet. He was a retired police K-9, trained in takedowns, tracking, and protection. Though he had been out of service for a few years, his instincts had never faded. That evening, Eleanor was returning home from the local grocery store. The sun had set, casting long shadows across the street. The town had grown rougher over the years, and lately she had heard stories of people being robbed, some even attacked by a group of young men who had no respect for anyone, especially the elderly. Still, Eleanor refused to let fear dictate her life. She walked the familiar path toward her house, Titan trotting beside her, his ears alert. As she neared the alleyway leading to her street, she felt Ida shift in the air. The kind of silence that wasn't natural. The kind that meant someone was watching. A voice broke the quiet. Well, look what we have here. Eleanor's grip tightened on her grocery bag. She turned her head slightly, just enough to see 3 men stepping out of the shadows. They were young, in their 20s, dressed in dark hoodies, their eyes filled with mischief. "You're out a little late, aren't you, Granny?" One of them sneered, taking a few steps closer. Eleanor didn't respond. She had learned long ago that some men thrived on fear. Give them a reaction, and they would feed off it. Another one laughed. "What's in the bag? Something good?" He reached out as if to snatch it from her hands. Titan let out a low growl. The man hesitated for a split second before scoffing. "Oh, come on, it's just a dog. What's he gonna do?" The third man, the tallest of the group, cracked his knuckles. "Forget the bag. Maybe we should teach this old lady a lesson for walking around like she owns the place." Eleanor's heart pounded, but she still didn't speak. Instead, she took a slow, deliberate step back, just enough to let Titan position himself in front of her. The men didn't realize it yet, but they had just made the worst mistake of their lives. Eleanor didn't flinch. She had spent too many years standing tall against the world to let a few thugs intimidate her now. But she wasn't the only one who sensed the danger. Titan had already moved. His body stiffened, his tail raised, ears locked forward. The quiet old dog these men had mocked was now a coiled spring, ready to explode. The leader took another step closer, his fingers twitching like he was itching for a fight. "I don't think you heard me, old lady," he said, reaching out toward Eleanor's arm. That was the moment Titan decided. With one deep, bone-chilling bark, he launched forward, closing the distance in a heartbeat. The leader had no time to react. Titan's powerful jaws clamped down on his forearm. The man screamed, stumbling backward, completely overpowered. "What the hell?" one of the others yelled. Titan wasn't done. He twisted his head, pulling the thug off balance and slamming him to the ground with the force of a trained takedown. The man's head hit the pavement with a loud thud, his cocky arrogance replaced with sheer terror. The second thug, realizing this was no ordinary dog, pulled out a knife. His hands were shaking, his confidence shattered. "Get your dog off him, lady, or I swear." Eleanor's voice was calm, almost amused. "Try it." The man hesitated, glancing between Eleanor and Titan, who still had his teeth buried in his friend's arm. The thug in Titan's grip was whimpering now, his earlier bravado completely gone. The third man, the one who had laughed the loudest before, had already started backing away. "Nah, man, this ain't worth it," he muttered, his voice unsteady. Titan finally released the first man, but he didn't back down. He stepped forward instead, placing himself between Eleanor and the men, his chest heaving with controlled aggression. The message was clear. One more step, and he wouldn't stop next time. The man with the knife clenched his jaw. His eyes darted around the street, searching for an escape. His friend groaned on the ground, still holding his injured arm. "This isn't over." "The knife," Wielder muttered. Eleanor tilted her head slightly, a smirk tugging at the corner of her lips. "Oh, I think it is." That was all it took. The two remaining men turned and sprinted down the street, disappearing into the night. The leader, still groaning on the ground, forced himself up and staggered after them. Titan watched them go, his eyes never leaving them until they were out of sight. Then, and only then, did he sit back down beside Eleanor's job done. Eleanor smiled down at him, patting his head. "Good boy, Titan." Titan just wagged his tail. This had been just another night on duty. Eleanor took a deep breath, feeling the tension in her shoulders ease as she watched the men disappear into the night. Titan sat beside her, his ears still perked up, his body alert, ready for any sign of danger. But the moment the last thug turned the corner and vanished, Titan finally relaxed, letting out a slow breath. The street was quiet again, but the aftermath of what had just happened hung thick in the air. The same men who had approached her with arrogance and confidence had been reduced to nothing more than frightened boys running for their lives. Eleanor looked down at Titan and smiled. "I think that went well, do not you?" she said softly, running her fingers through his thick fur. Titan let out a small huff, almost like he was agreeing with her. But the night was not over yet. A moment later, Eleanor heard the sound of sirens in the distance. Someone must have heard the commotion and called the police. She had lived in this neighborhood long enough to know that help did not always come quickly, but tonight, fate was on her side. Within minutes, a patrol car pulled up, its lights flashing brightly against the dark street. Two uniformed officers stepped out, their hands resting near their holsters, scanning the area for a threat. "Ma'am, are you all right?" one of them asked as he approached. Eleanor gave a small nod. "I am just fine, officer. But I think you might want to be looking for 3 young men running like their lives depend on it." The officers exchanged a glance before one of them spoke into his radio, relaying the description of the attackers. Then, as they got closer, one of them finally noticed Titan. His eyes widened. "Wait a second." He nudged his partner. Is that Titan?" The second officer's head snapped up. His face went from professional curiosity to absolute shock. "Sergeant Titan? No way." Eleanor chuckled. "I see his reputation still follows him." The officers immediately straightened up, their entire demeanor shifting from treating her like just another citizen to one of deep respect. "I trained with this dog when he was still in the force," the first officer said, shaking his head in amazement. "He was one of the best K-9s we ever had." The second officer nodded. "Took down more criminals than half the force combined." He let out a low whistle. "No wonder those guys ran. They did not stand a chance." Eleanor smiled proudly. "He may be retired, but I assure you he has not lost his touch." The officers could not help but laugh. "Well, I think he just made our job a lot easier tonight." One of them knelt down and reached out a hand. "Good to see you again, Titan." Titan sniffed the officer's hand before giving him a small lick, his tail wagging slightly. He may not have been on the force anymore, but in that moment, it was clear that he would always be a cop at heart. The police department posted the security footage, showing Titan's quick reaction. The story went viral, and people celebrated the loyalty and bravery of retired police dogs. After this incident, crime in the area dropped significantly. No one wanted to take the risk of running into Eleanor and her harmless dog again. All 3 men pled guilty to attempted robbery and assault. They never underestimated anyone again. This story proves that appearances can be deceiving. They saw an elderly woman and a dog. They didn't see a woman who had survived decades of challenges. They didn't see a K-9 trained to take down the most dangerous criminals. And they certainly didn't see karma coming for them at full speed. Never assume someone is helpless, because you might be the one who needs help in the end. Subscribe for more powerful stories of unexpected heroes and real-life karma.